Hey, all my party people at home. Today, it was a very mild day, as you can see. There were only 3 things on our agenda to complete today because I want to make sure that we're understanding that part 1 of our assessment before we move on, because we're going to continue to need summary and crafting an evidence-based response. So today we did something called the daily dilemma. I don't know if that's something we'll do every day, but we might do it a couple of times a week or once a week. It's a great way to solidify the discussion that we had the day before about ethical dilemmas and doing what's ethical, taking into consideration what's right versus what's wrong. So after that, we reviewed evidence-based responses, or those I did it again, darn it, analysis, as well as talking about summary. So don't forget that your web quest is due tomorrow. You need to do sections 1, 2, and 3. And then I will assign something for the wild ride tomorrow as well, for kind of a homework to practice. Also, don't forget that the Blooket code is still active until Thursday. I didn't change where it says today's question, but it's more of today's quote, and it is from William James. William James has said, "The greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it." So, creating a legacy. What better way to use your life's purpose than to do something so great that someone remembers you and talks about it for quite some time, whether it is a teacher or a principal or family. Spend your life doing something that would make others proud and they would want to keep talking about it. All right, so let's get into this daily dilemma. Like I said, we've been talking about ethical dilemmas. We've been talking about ethical choices, knowing the difference between right and wrong, and how do we make that decision? Can sometimes something that's wrong be almost considered right? Or vice versa? Are there certain instances where we might consider it wrong, but because of A, B, and C, we can say, well, I feel like I can make this decision and be okay with it. Almost time for class. I'm going to pause before I get interrupted by loud honors kids. So, like I said, we are looking at these dilemmas that we can face where ethics is put into play, right versus wrong. With the trolley problem, that is something that adults have argued back and forth. Is this right? Is this wrong? What makes one thing over another right or wrong? But here is a daily dilemma that I want you to kind of stew on as you I want you to stew on it, and it's something you can like chew on as a kid, because this is an ethical dilemma that you could face or you have faced before. So I'll read it. Georgia's hands were sweating. She was 15 minutes into her math final when she began to panic. This exam was worth most of her grade in class. She understood math, even liked it, and usually did really well. Her constant problem was that she wasn't a strong test taker. Her grades never reflected her understanding of the material she studied. Now here she was, once again, stuck on one problem worth 25 points on the test, and she was drawing a blank. She put her head down on the desk and concentrated as hard as she could. She remembered doing a similar problem in class and explaining it to her friend Jessie, but now she was so stressed out by the test, she couldn't even remember how to begin the problem. She lifted her head and stared at her test. She listened to the clock tick on the wall and imagined her parents' expression when she received her report card. Jessie was sitting right in front of her. He is always a good test taker and had already solved the problem. The teacher had his back turned and was on the other side of the room. Georgia could look over Jessie's shoulder, get the answer, and no one would know. Georgia needed to think quickly. She thought about how unfair it was that she regularly does bad on tests even though she works hard in class and understands the material too. She thought about how often she helped Jessie in class through the semester. What should she do? So this is a point in class where we kind of talked about what she should do. Should she cheat? Should she not? We are all kind of taught that cheating is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's ethically wrong. But you have to take into account all of these other considerations that she is thinking about as she tries to question herself, should she cheat? She prided herself on doing what was right, but how right is it that she has to work in a system that doesn't reward such hard work? Finally, she took a deep breath. She looked to see if the teacher was still on the other side of the room and glanced over Jessie's shoulder, just long enough to get the final answer to the question. Then she figured out the rest of the problem on her own. In the moment, she felt great about her decision. She felt she had sort of created an ethical compromise. But on the way home, on the bus, George's good feelings started to fade. What exactly is an ethical compromise, anyway? She thought to herself. Should she tell her teacher what she did, or move forward and forget the whole thing? So in class, we sort of have discussed these ethical compromises that a student and that Georgia was going through. And this is seen in studies where students were asked about their cheating, that these 5 different types of ethical compromises would be a reason for people to say, well, it's okay, because one of them would be denial of injury, saying that, okay, well, my decision is not hurting anyone, so it's fine if I do this. Or being the victim, saying, well, it's the teacher's fault that we have to take this test and it's worth so much. And it is the teacher's fault that they aren't giving me credit that's due. Appealing to higher loyalties, saying, well, I know this is wrong, but what about my parents and what would they think when I bring this report card home? Denying the idea of being responsible for your own actions. Everyone does it. Well, if I don't do it, then I'm still left in the dust because good guys finish last. And a fear of failure, that they cheat because they don't want to seem like they're stupid or a failure. I have to win. I have to do this so I can do the next thing, so I can do the next thing. So you may have seen where it says Daily Dilemma, Georgia. These are the questions that you are going to be answering. You don't have to answer all of them. You're only going to answer 2. So you can see that you can answer your George's question at the end. Should she tell her teacher, or should she move on? And then I want you to also ask yourself, is there such thing as an ethical compromise? Is it okay to cheat sometimes, but not okay to cheat all the time? When is it okay to consider cheating or consider doing something else wrong because you have to compromise between 2 decisions? Talking about someone ever cheating off of you. Or do you agree with George's point that it's unfair that she works so hard, yet she still scores so low? And also, you could tell me, what would you do in this situation? If you were Georgia, what would you have done? Would you be okay with it even after the fact, like she felt guilty afterwards? So these are 5 questions that you can answer after the fact. You need to only choose 2. If you need a second to get this work done, go ahead and pause this video so you have this in front of you, and then you can start it again once you're ready. So once you're ready, let's talk about what else we talked about again today. Summary was one of them. We know that it's important to summarize important pieces of a text. A summary is condensed. A summary is brief. It has main events or main details or ideas in it, and it doesn't have an opinion inside of it. You can use a summary as an evidence-based response. but you do not have to. You can start it and just summarize the text that answers the idea that you're going on, and then explain why it matches that idea. When we look here, this is a story we have not read, but it has a very good summary about how Laura, the character, is affected over the entire course of the story by the popular group's laughter and how they whisper whenever she's around. So it says, through the passage, Laura is wary of the group of popular students who she dubs the in-group. She describes them as cold and unkind and giving her hostile stares. Because of their general unfriendliness toward her, Laura is particularly paranoid every time she hears them talking or laughing, assuming that she is the subject of their cruel laughter. When Laura hears one of the popular kids say, "What a scream! I can't wait to hear what she says," Laura assumes that they are talking about her, and she flushes painfully. Laura is embarrassed when she believes that she is the source of the in-group's cruel laughter. But when Laura sees the cards the popular kids create and distribute to their classmates, she comes to a realization. They weren't out to get her. It was only Rachel. At this moment in the story, it becomes clear that whatever Laura heard about the popular kids laughing or talking, they were planning to humiliate Rachel by wearing the mocking Hortensky fan club cards. Despite knowing what it feels like to worry about being the target of the in-group's mocking, Laura ultimately joins the in-group in humiliating Rachel. She picked up a card and pinned it to her sweater. Laura was unwilling to stand up against the in-group's bullying of Rachel and risk becoming an outsider and a potential target of bullying herself. So, you have, if I were to look through this paragraph, I can see where it says right here, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraphs 5 and 6, paragraph 58, and paragraph 60. So there are 5 instances where they take an event from the story to support that final idea of how she was affected. And we can see that she was affected because she decides to become the bully. She does not want to be bullied. So in order to stop herself from being bullied, because she felt before when she thought they were laughing and whispering at her, she felt that pain and that embarrassment. So to avoid that happening to herself, she makes sure that she puts herself and aligns herself with the in-group. And we use 5 different instances to show how she felt when they were laughing, how she feels like when they were whispering, what actually happened, and what she does in response to it. So this is a summary response to where it talks about how over the course of the story, through the course of the story, it affects her in a way in what she decides to do towards the end of the story. When we look at this question down here, which most of us have seen before, it says, how does Mary's careful planning influence the outcome of the story? Use evidence from the text to support your response. Be sure to explain how each piece of evidence supports your analysis. So when we are going through, we need to think, well, what was the outcome of the story? I need to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. The outcome of the story was that Mary gets away with murder. That's how the story ends. Now we need to summarize how Mary gets away with murder, how we summarize that outcome. Well, the first thing I know that she does is Mary cooks and gets rid of the murder weapon. She also practices how to behave so she does not give herself away.